Hello and welcome to the THC Show. I'm your host Neil Magnuson, and this is a show where we talk about things that are true that we sometimes don't like very much, and that's why we also talk about some hope about what to do about those things. And to have some hope, we need to have some way to change, so we like to talk about some mechanisms for change. On the show today, we'll have 8 out of 10 Glenn from CannaMatch.ca join us for the 420 session. As always, Jerry Martin will not be here today. He's now in his court case that's going on. They're into their second day of testimony. And there's a publication ban for anybody that's been taking part or witnessing the court case, and I don't want to put Jerry on the spot and have him talk about things he's not supposed to be talking about. We'll catch up with him a little later on in previous show and in future shows to find out what's going on with that. We'll also do our regular check-in with the folks in the Healing Wave RV and the Cannabis Substitution Program and see what's going on with that. Last week's show was a different show because it was 420 that happened to fall on the show day. We didn't really post the show the same way as we normally do. In fact, the show was embedded in the all-day long live stream of the 2019 420 rally at Sunset Beach in Vancouver, but you can find it there and it has been posted. 420 this year, there was a small gathering at Sunset Beach, and I decided to go down and do what I could to try to keep it as responsible as event as possible and to report on what was going on down there. You know, in life, most people are trying to do the right thing. Most people want to do the right thing. And it's sometimes pretty easy to do the right thing, especially when you know what the right thing is. But it's not always easy to do the right thing, and sometimes it's not very easy to understand what would be the right thing to do. I was torn a little bit about whether I should even go down there with public health announcements about not having gatherings and what have you. But I decided that the right thing to do for me was to go down there to report on what happened, but also to do my part to try to keep it as safe and responsible a gathering as possible. I must say I was very pleased with the people that showed up there. There was a handful of vendors. All the vendors were wearing masks, and they had hand sanitizer there for people. And the people pretty much kept their distance from each other, and it was a good show. But I'm here to report that the media that reported on that event, in some cases, did a very biased job and an unfair job, and in fact, they misreported what was happening. Because a little further down the park, or down the beach, there was quite a big rally with thousands of people that was part of a No More New Normal rally. And the media, in some cases, reported that that was the 420 rally, and they were quite disgusted with the thousands of people all unmasked that were there. But that was not the cannabis community that showed up for that rally. That was a different rally, but you would sure not know that if you watched some of the media reports. But that is what happened. The event itself, like I say, was held in a very responsible way. Everybody took their own initiative to try to make sure that it was properly presented. It was done because it's important. It's extremely important. I did have some comments about, well, now we've got legalization, so there's nothing else to protest, so no point in 420, especially during a pandemic. But, you know, that's certainly not the case. In Canada, we've been given so-called legalization of recreational non-medical cannabis, but it's not what we've been asking for. It's not what the activists have been protesting about for all these years. They're still spending as much and more money than before on enforcement on illegal cannabis, because now there's legal cannabis and illegal cannabis, and supposedly legal cannabis comes from government licensed producers and sold through government licensed stores, and everything else is still illegal cannabis, and for that you can go to jail, be fined, lose your kids, and all the rest of the stuff that can happen with prohibition. And, you know, it's just so wrong. I mean, there's never been any justification for cannabis to be a criminal offense to possess, to grow, or to sell, yet that's what our governments have done, without success at all. In fact, if you were to gauge the amount of cannabis being used post-prohibition to pre-prohibition, or during prohibition, you would see that prohibition really didn't stop people from using cannabis at all. And now that we've got legalization, there's still tons of people that are out using illegal cannabis because they're not happy with the government system. There's a lot to protest about this so-called legalization. One of the things we had asked for all along in our protests and at 420 and the other rallies that we put on is that they stop wasting our tax dollars. There should be no tax dollars wasted on interfering with people who are growing plants or using plants or even trading plants or selling plants. None of that is a criminal offense. A criminal offense is when you have the knowledge and intention to actually do damage of significance to somebody else, and you go ahead and do that. Those are the requirements for it to be a crime, the actus rea and the mens rea of a crime. And when it comes to having possession of some flowers that you think might help you feel better, well, there's certainly no intent to do damage, and there's no victim, and there's no damage done. So there's no reason for the criminal law to be evoked. And in fact, having the criminal law involved brings great disrespect to governments and to police, causes all sorts of problems within families and within the school system, all kinds of problems with trying to prohibit a natural plant that free people would like to access because they think it might help them feel better. That is certainly not a crime. So that's a huge thing to continue to protest about. We can't just accept what we've been given and allow this situation to now be the norm, where the government is still spending huge amounts of our precious tax dollars to go around and interfere with free people about which plants that they're using, selling, or growing. So that's a great reason to protest. But an even bigger reason to protest is the lack of access to medical patients and to people that are on fixed incomes or low income. They are not included in this so-called legalization at all. The government has in fact raised the price of cannabis that you would purchase from these government stores, from what you'll be able to get on the street. And on the street there's better cannabis than what the government has to offer. Cannabis that's not been irradiated or sprayed with a whole bunch of sprays to kill the microbes, because in the black market they're not going to waste money on chemicals to kill microbes, because microbes don't hurt anybody, never have, and there's no reason to be trying to eliminate them. But the government wants to continue to scare people about cannabis and say that it's dangerous, and that's why they have to regulate it tightly and restrict access and all the rest of it. And it's all just smoke and mirrors to try to keep a whole bunch of rich people getting richer, and they're the ones who are invested in the cannabis legalization. In fact, it's even many of the previous prohibitionites, the ones that were in charge of putting people in jail and ruining people's lives, that have now taken jobs as CEOs and other high positions within these government licensed producers and what have you. So that's a really good reason to protest. But for medical patients who, prior to legalization, in many cases had a storefront that they could go into, they could find a whole variety of different medical grade cannabis products that they wanted to use for themselves, and even the people that were working there had some knowledge about what cannabis could be used for and could be helpful with. Now, with legalization, what we've got is non-medical recreational stores where they're not even allowed to talk about the benefits of cannabis, and we're not even sure the cannabis they're selling has the same benefits of cannabis grown naturally and organically and that's available on the black market. So the medical users need to have a storefront. That's a basic human right. What other commodity that people want to have is there that you don't have a storefront to walk into? Even for prescription medication controlled tightly by the Medical Association, where doctors write prescriptions for these things. You get your prescription for dangerous, toxic drugs, and within a half an hour, you're in the pharmacy next door getting what it is that the doctor said you could use. Whereas with cannabis, if he does approve it, now you've got to choose an LP, contact an LP, have your doctor contact the LP, be accepted by the LP, go through an online menu where you can't see or smell the cannabis, I mean, you can see pictures of it, but what does that tell you? Nothing. And so many other barriers. I mean, you don't get it in a day, you don't get it in 2 days. You're lucky if you get it in 2 or 3 weeks after being prescribed it. So if you have a medical condition and you have an urgent need and cannabis is what's going to work for you, well, you just can't have it legally for 2, 3, 4 weeks and more because of this system that the government has put into place. So it's really discriminatory against medical users, and many people are suffering because of that, and that's a huge reason. That's my big reason for why I think it was important to go down and use the platform that we have of 420 to speak to these issues. I mean, how ludicrous is it that a grandmother and a grandfather, want to use cannabis, but it's going to take them a long time to get it, and then it might not be what they want, and then if they want to change LPs, they have to go through another long waiting period, and all they want to do is deal with their arthritis and sleep properly. Whereas their 19-year-old grandson can go and get himself a half sack of beer, walk into a government cannabis store, get himself a bag of cannabis, and he's good for the night. How stupid is that? Why would the government be discriminating against the old people, the sick people, the poor people? Well, I'll tell you why. It's because they're in bed with a bunch of rich, greedy bastards, and that's the system they decided that they could give us because we were not only demanding legalization, but we were proving that legalization was the right thing to do. We had shown over the years that cannabis, not only is it not dangerous and addictive and harmful to people that use it, but it's really good for people. It's a very, very good medicine. All you have to do is Google the endocannabinoid system and you can find out for yourself why it is that cannabis is such good medicine for people. We're made out of plants. Well, maybe we're made out of sunlight, but we're made out of plants that absorb the sunlight to get the minerals and the nutrients that make our bodies work. And so plants not only give us our energy and build our bodies, but they help us with our medical conditions. They can help us with the problems that our human bodies have because we're all part of the same family of life here on this planet. So the endocannabinoid system is a system that is developed through evolution in all of the vertebrates on this planet, where cannabinoids are created within the bodies of the vertebrates, the exact mimics of the cannabinoids that are produced in plants, that are taxed with going and maintaining homeostasis amongst all the other systems within the bodies. So the role of cannabis is as a supplement to that endocannabinoid system, which is there ready to take on whatever happens, be it trauma, be it inflammation, be it depression, anxiety, whatever it is that's wrong with you. Cannabis can be a supplement to the system that your own body has that manufactures those cannabinoids to deal with those situations. So cannabis is really good for people. It's not harmful for people. It helps people sleep. It helps them with pain, with inflammation, with depression and anxiety, and just overall well-being. Cannabis is a wonderful natural commodity that we have grown up with on this planet for millennia. It is a huge symbiotic part of what it means to be alive and to be human here. And it is so abominably wrong that our public servants and governments around the world have seen fit to demonize this plant so that they can make money. And trust me, that's the only reason it was ever demonized and criminalized. It wasn't because it was a dangerous commodity driving people insane and causing violence in our society or harming people in any way. That's never the reason for prohibition of cannabis. The reason is it's just too valuable to let people have it at the cost of what it would actually take to produce it. It's just too valuable. It's going to take money away from other industries that have patentable products that can compete with cannabis only if cannabis is prohibited. But otherwise, cannabis would rule the day for what we make our clothing out of, for all the different things that we use. Cannabis could be a big part of a lot of that, except the governments have seen fit to bow down to the corporations that want to protect their own financial interests, and they've tried to maintain cannabis prohibition for all of these decades. For the decades that I've been involved in trying to turn this thing around, where the last 20 years we've really shown how valuable cannabis is for medical patients, how harmless it is for just about anybody that uses it. It is really hard to abuse cannabis. It's really hard. You can take the strongest concentrates, smoke more than you should, and yeah, you'll probably green out. You might even pass out. You might sleep for a while. But there will be no significant harm to your body in any way, shape, or form. So it's time that we end this madness. People need a storefront. It's as simple as that. Why the hell wouldn't there be a store where you can walk into and get the products that people want? Millions of people are using cannabis across Canada. Millions. There's 420,000 plus people that have gotten prescriptions from their doctor to be able to use cannabis as medicine. So even though Health Canada doesn't want to admit that cannabis is medicine and has medical value because they're afraid of what that would do with the United States, it also wants to maintain at a federal level that cannabis has no medicinal value. 420,000 plus people with a doctor supporting them, along with another probably 2 million people that don't have a doctor supporting them, but are using cannabis as a medicine, and probably another couple million people that would if they could get it reasonably and it was a storefront to walk into and they could have their needs met there. So it's a real abomination that's going on here. It's one of the biggest stories we've got going on in our world and has been for quite a while now, that especially in supposed free democratic countries, that public servants could come up with some scam to make a plant illegal and make a bunch of money by criminalizing people and seizing their property and fining them money and then using them as fillers for a prison system that makes money by how many people are in there, and all of these things that are being done. It is a huge, huge news story, in my opinion, that cannabis was ever made illegal and that it remains illegal in 2021. This is outrageous. And I know we have now in 2021 legal cannabis, but that doesn't take away from the idea that there's still a whole bunch of illegal cannabis that people are purchasing on the black market, risking their lives, risking their liberty, from people who are risking even more of their lives and their liberty by selling it to them or growing it for them. This situation really needs to stop as quickly as possible here. It should have stopped a long time ago, but here we are. I'm still having to do a show where the main focus of our show is about this situation where sick, poor people can't get a natural herb that would help them in their lives because governments are corrupt. That's what I have to focus on. That's the biggest news story in my life. That's what I dedicate my show to, because this is huge news. And it's also even actually huge news that you don't hear much about that in the mainstream media. It's another example of how deep the corruption runs in our society, that mainstream media doesn't report on this. I mean, here we are with what's going on in my particular situation, where we've been handing out cannabis in the form of high-dose edibles to hundreds of people. For 3.5 years, it was twice a week. Well, for a year, it was once a week. For another 3 years, it was twice a week. And now for the last 10.5 months, we've been offering it 6 days a week, 8 hours a day. And yet we're not legal. We could easily be raided by the police. It already happened once because they didn't quite realize who we were at that time. They're aware of us. They know that we're here and what we're doing is good. We have so much support from doctors and professors and nurses, and all the local harm reduction groups approve of what we're doing. They support what we're doing. We have letters from all of them as part of our application to the federal government to allow us to continue to do this and be licensed. And part of those letters that we've got is clearly stated by these healthcare professionals, the experts in the field, that the hundreds of people that we're helping with high-dose edibles would be put at risk of death if we were to withdraw our services. So we sit and wait patiently after applying over 7 months ago for licenses from the federal government. And it's even worse than that, because we know licenses are going to take some time because of the Cannabis Act and how legalization is structured. It's not really set up to allow for people to get low barrier access to cannabis, to get good quality cannabis extracts and the whole range of cannabis products at reasonable, affordable prices. We know that's going to be difficult because of the scam they're trying to pull on us. But the other thing we applied for at the same time was just a temporary ministerial exemption to allow us to keep doing what we're doing. And not only do it, the way we did it for 4 years, which was outside of Vandu on the sidewalk with people lining up for hours to get and that included going through winter and summer and all the inclement weather, where we moved into a storefront because the city passed a motion saying they would support that, and yet they didn't support it because we couldn't get permission from Health Canada or from the federal government. So that's why we applied for an emergency ministerial exemption. 419, roll them if you got them. We'll be joining Glenn in just a minute. But really, it shouldn't take much to get that ministerial exemption. It just takes a signature on a piece of paper from Patty Haydu, the federal health minister, that says what these people are doing is important. They're saving lives during an epidemic of overdose deaths. Don't interfere with them. And then the city of Vancouver would give us a license to go back into the store that we had, and we could provide our service in a much better way than we are now. We've been quite limited in how we're able to help people. We had to cap the amount of people that we could help. I should mention, for those who don't know, that once we got evicted from the store because the city wouldn't give us a license, because the federal government wouldn't give us that exemption, we immediately overnight got an RV, and we've been parked out front in the RV on the curb, where you're only allowed to park for 2 hours at a time apparently, but we've been there for 5.5 months now. Almost 6 months. It'll be 6 months, November, December, January, February, March, April, and we're moving into May. So it's been 6 months in 2 days that we've been out in the RV through the whole winter time, I might add, and now it's getting hot in the summertime. Now we're investing in fans. Prior to that, we were investing in propane. But that's where we are, that's where we're at, and we'll get back to more of this later. Right now, we got to take a break from all this. The Sacred Herb is with us, and Glenn Wells is here to share it. So come on in, Glenn. How you doing, buddy?
Sir?
Yeah, I'm doing all right. Smoking some pineapple kush.
You remember that movie where they went, "You got mail"?
Sure.
You got mail.
I got mail?
You got mail! Now, I forgot to bring this to you a couple of weeks ago.
Oh, really?
But yes, you have mail. And being that last week we were at 420, I didn't bring it at all. I remembered this
I'm like
week.
a kid at Christmas time.
I know.
I think I know what it might be.
Oh, I know. You might, because I might have one too.
You might have brought it on the show earlier.
I may have, yes, maybe about a month ago or something.
I might have liked it a lot.
You did, yes. And he's watching right now too.
Oh, is he? Well, thank you very much. I appreciate this.
Brian.
You'll have to deal with Glenn about why I didn't get it weeks ago.
Yeah, well, I already explained why. I forgot. That's just
oh, man.
I will own it.
We're not allowed to forget, though.
No, I know.
No, because then they blame it on the weed.
Yes.
Lots of people out there in the world, they forget lots of things lots of time, but if you're a stoner...
last week I was a cameraman, so...
Yes, you were.
Yeah.
This is exactly what
there
I thought it was.
You got stickers, too.
I got stickers.
Oh, there you go.
I got a card there. You can probably see that if you want to find a phone number or a way to order. That's probably on there. I got a sticker here. We'll probably add that to
there you go. There you go. The sticker drawer.
A new thing today. This must have fallen down.
Oh, it must have.
Yeah. A couple of new things today.
Oh, yes. I know who did that.
This is from Cassie Campbell, by the way. She has art for sale. And if you know about Cassie, she's a young lady that is in all kinds of trouble in her life. She's deaf. She's in a wheelchair. She has great mobility issues. And she managed to produce that. I think that is absolutely incredible. Thank you, Cassie, for doing that and allowing us to have that. Now, the other thing we got that's new today are these hoodies.
Oh!
Yeah, we're going to have t-shirts as well that are all labeled for the Cannabis Substitution Program, and they're going to be available. I think we already posted that. $25 minimum donation, and that's a real bargain. These are good quality hoodies.
Oh, yeah.
And you can have yourself a CSP hoodie and promote what we're doing here. So we're very thrilled about that as well.
Start one up in your own town by promoting it. Somebody might say, hey, we should do that.
Yeah, shout out to Chris Backer in Halifax, who's been running the CSP East Coast there for well over a year now, doing fabulous work in his community. Mary McCarty, who was our main baker here for quite a while, and as she came here from back east, has now moved back to London, Ontario. And she's, today I believe she'll be doing 50 care packs like she did last Tuesday. She's got the CSP going there. There's others happening in other places across Canada. There's even... I was told that there's something going on with the CSP down in California.
Wow.
It's taken on a life of its own. The CSP is a project that anybody can be a part of, and we need to have these things in all communities across Canada. And what the CSP is about is providing no-cost cannabis to people that are otherwise struggling with addiction. That's the spirit of what the CSP is about. We have an epidemic of overdose deaths due to a poison drug supply. And so the CSP has been providing high-dose edibles because high-dose edibles, not smoked cannabis so much, not strong enough, but the high-dose edibles are a much stronger way to take cannabis. And that can help people get right through withdrawal. The most important and most pronounced barrier to getting off of opioids is going through the withdrawal. And then it can replace the use of those opioids and street drugs as well. So it's a wonderful thing that needs to get more promotion, because the mainstream media, once again, is not covering what we're doing.
We got a little bit at 420.
We got a little bit.
Yeah, I got you in there. I did mention it too. But you know what? I just also realized the CSP says Cannabis Substitution Project or Program, right?
It was a project, now it's a program.
It also can save people.
It can save people.
There you go, CSP, both ways. See what smoking dope does for you?
You're forgiven for forgetting about that.
Yeah, it can save people. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, you want this?
Oh.
Yeah. Okay. I found a strain that might work for me.
Yeah.
Because I get headaches sometimes. We're still looking into that. But no, it's not the Congolese at all.
Oh.
It's the pineapple kush. Somebody mentioned that pineapple kush.
Should I fall off my chair? Because you can't have cushions.
Because typically the kush, the strong pungent kush is what really sparks my headaches a lot of time.
Yeah.
But this doesn't have that strong pungent taste or smell to it.
Okay. So it's a nice hybrid for you.
It seems to work. I seem to be able to smoke this after having had a headache the night before or whatever. without having a return of the headache.
Yeah.
So,
well, that's good.
you know.
Well, see, the hybrids can be good for you.
Well, cannabis comes in so many different strains.
Oh,
right?
I know.
And many medical people, they're on a journey to try to find the strains that work best for them. Many people have already found that particular strain. They know what it is, and it really does that. But the cannabinoid profiles of the cannabis different strains are quite complex.
Yeah.
There's maybe 100 different cannabinoids, many of them in small quantities, but still the effects are there.
Yeah.
And when you change the ratios of those cannabinoids, it changes the effects it has on individuals.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I remember.
right strain.
Like there's certain strains that people just really like too.
Which is another reason why the whole LP
Girl
system
Scout
for medical.
or
one works
something.
good?
Yeah, good. Yeah, I've heard that one.
Yeah, and it's another reason why the whole government system of accessing medical cannabis through LPs doesn't work very well.
Yeah.
Because you can tell by sense of smell, for one thing, in many cases, whether this strain is going to be helpful. Many people can use their nose to find that out.
Somebody's asking if you know how many strains exist.
Oh, man.
No, I know. Hey, we don't know.
That's a really tough question.
Maybe Google could do that.
No, I don't even think Google could do it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so crazy out there in the world right now where people are just naming things their own strain.
Yes.
We got all
And
these
we got
LPs
hybrids too, right?
coming up with, they'll take this one strain that's been known as this for so long, and now they're going to change it to rebrand it for their own purposes.
And if you were stoned and you got some seeds and then you forgot the name of the seeds and you grew the plant, now you're going to name the plant your own because you forgot because you're stoned. So we can do that too, right?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different names, like hundreds
Yes.
of different names of cannabis strains out there. Many of them are overlapping, where the same strain is actually called by 3 or 4 or 5, 6 different names.
Yeah.
I know that the dispensaries, not the government stores, but the medical dispensaries, they would have anywhere from 30 to 100 different strains.
Yes.
And they would have people come in there and try different strains. In many
which
cases,
works.
if they were people that didn't have a lot of financial resources, they'd be given a gram to try to see if it works for them.
Which you can't do with the
can't
government.
do with the LPs. In fact, like I say, you can't smell it. You have to just order it by name and by picture, and you don't know what you're getting till it gets there. If it doesn't work for you, you're stuck with it. There's no return policy.
Nope.
Now you need to try a different strain.
Yeah.
Some people find with the LPs, and I don't know too many of these people because I don't know too many people who use the LPs, but I do know that some of the statistics about how it's working there. That a lot of people find that the LP that they first choose, like you have to choose an LP once your doctor gives you permission, and then that LP has their own particular menu of what they have. Well, they don't have all the strains that some of the other LPs have. And so many people, they'll try this LP and they won't have what they want. They'll want to try a different LP. They got to go through the same process of weeks before they can switch over to another LP and go through their doctor. And all of this is just ludicrous and unjustified.
And when you were saying that, you said it takes weeks. Well, I've been waiting 1.5 years because of COVID for my 100 gram ACMPR. Now, their first excuse was, well, it's COVID, it's taking too long. The second excuse was, well, your 90-day criminal records check for your designated grower expired because we didn't get to it in time. Right? So there's a whole year gone right there.
Because you have to renew your license every year.
Now they've got everything. They put it in the computer system so it's there, but it's been there since December. And it's still processing.
I know there's lots of people who got...
So 6 months, I'm legally not allowed to be using my medicine, right? Or growing anything, which I'm not because I'm growing outside right now.
So, if you grow for yourself, or if you get somebody else to grow for you, for medical purposes, you can also grow outdoor.
Yes.
But I know many people who applied to be able to grow outdoor plants around this time last year, and their license wasn't approved until the fall. So the whole growing season is gone. Now they've got to wait another half a year before they get back to the next growing season. And it's just it is an insane system.
The 4 that I'm allowed. I have 3 because only 3 came up out of 6.
I see.
Right, but so that's what I'm doing.
Take a clone.
Huh?
Take a clone.
Take a clone.
Take an early clone. Take 5 early clones.
Yes.
Don't just grow 4 plants.
But
a corrupt government shouldn't be dictating to you as a free human being how many plants you can grow for yourself.
Yeah, it takes them a long time.
On purpose.
Have so many excuses.
Yeah.
So many excuses.
They don't want to make it work.
No.
They just don't. I mean, that was clear right from the start. Even the legalization that we got was sort of like, they went around and they started asking people, us people.
Yeah.
They held things. We went to them, Dr. Weir and the rest of them, how can we legalize weed in a way that works for you people? So we laid it all out for them.
Yeah,
and then they did the exact opposite of just about everything we asked for.
Exactly. They got the information so they could do it fucking
So they could do it the exact opposite.
Yeah. Because if they didn't ask us, they could have done it right. And then we would have been all happy, right?
And all of this, why is all of this happening like this? Why is the world so messed up like this? Well, I'll tell you why. Because 100 years ago, a little bit beyond that, they realized that cannabis was medicine and it was valuable and it was really valuable. And so they needed to make sure that not everybody could just grow it or get it easily. And so because they couldn't patent it, so they went on a media campaign. William Randolph Hearst, for example, a newspaper magnate in the United States, he put out story after. He hated marijuana.
Yeah.
He hated the Mexicans who smoked marijuana because they reclaimed Mexico, which was part of the land that he felt he owned.
Yeah.
And he was a tree baron as well. He had millions of hectares of trees, and he was turning trees into paper. Well, it turns out cannabis, or he found out he could turn his wood waste into paper. Mm-hmm. Cannabis had been used for paper prior to that, for the most part, parchment and cannabis.
And a lot of those books are still around today. Whereas paper books, some of them have disintegrated.
That's right.
Because they were just made without
cannabis is far superior paper.
Yeah.
But because of those motivational factors with William Randolph Hearst and the power he had with all of his media outlets across the United States, he went on a campaign to demonize cannabis.
Yeah.
He said anybody that went to court for a violent crime, when he reported on it, he'd throw in there that, and they were seemed to be smoking some reefer before the crime, or something like that. Reports are. And so that cannabis got this really bad name for up until the 60s when they had the Schaefer report and the Dane Commission here. Cannabis was seen to be something that made people violent, angry, raging.
The devil's lettuce.
I mean, if you read the reports, you can read, Emily Murphy. She was a suffragette judge here in Canada, and she wrote a book called The Black Candle. And in one of the chapters of her book on marijuana, called Marijuana, the New Menace, and she talked about how, this is 1922, by the way, she talked about this crazy drug from Mexico that was driving people completely violent and insane, that they would get heavily addicted, that they would die a horrible death in the process, that, all this terrible stuff she wrote about it. And all, basically completely the opposite of what cannabis is about. But these were based on the stories that were being written by William Randolph Hearst and those media reports of people that had a vested interest in keeping this plant down.
Yeah.
And so now here we are all these decades later. That media campaign convinced my grandmother and grandfather and my parents and all before them. And those people had great respect for the media. Because back in those days, if it was in the media, if it was printed, it was gospel.
Yeah.
And so whatever was there, Life magazine, Time magazine, Maclean's magazine, whatever was printed in there was gospel.
Yeah.
So when Maclean's magazine ran that story from Emily Murphy, they ran just that one chapter in one of their magazines back in 1922. That resulted in the government of Canada deciding in January of 1923 to just prohibit cannabis. They'd already prohibited opium and, the Chinese smoked version of opium and cocaine, and now they added this. And when they did it, there was no debate about it. There was no questions about it. It was simply a minister named Belland. He was a liberal minister at the time. He stood up and he said, "We've added a new drug to the schedule," and sat down. And that was it. That's all they said. And that new drug was cannabis indica, later to be added to cannabis sativa. And that's how it became illegal. But the demonization of it, where, my parents, my grandparents, all of their friends, anybody who wasn't involved in smoking weed, anybody who wasn't like a hippie back in the 60s and had that sort of an influence, the mainstream public, they really believed that cannabis was this demon drug. My grandmother died, she was 102. She passed away just a few years ago now. When she was 101, I was excited about one of the projects I had going on. I wanted to tell her about it, and she got really upset with me because it was cannabis, it was marijuana,
Yeah.
And I said, "Grandma, look in the Bible, on the very first page of the Bible, and you'll see that God creates all of the seed-bearing herbs. And when he looks upon them, he not only says they're good, he says they're very good.
And he goes on to say that they are for everyone. Those words are in the Bible on the first page. She refused to get the Bible. She did not want to see that. I said, you could go to Exodus and find out where Moses is making the holy anointing oil. Yeah. And he's given the ingredients. And there's 8 pounds of quanabasm, stinky cane, the cannabis. You know, and obviously this would be a plant that you would use in a healing anointing oil. Yeah. And so Christ, you know, Jesus was the Christ, the anointed one. Yeah. And yet, you know, she wouldn't have nothing to do with any of that. No. She was getting quite aggravated about the conversation, and I just shut up, and I never broached it with her again.
Because it was then, right?
But what she said to me when I said, Grandma, this is one of God's plants. And she said, it is not. And I said, well, the devil didn't make any plants. And she says, yes, he did. Can you imagine that? That, you know, so far twisted by this demonization of this plant that my, you know, grandmother, my pious religious grandmother, had come to believe that God wasn't even responsible for making the cannabis plant. It had to be done by the devil. Yeah. So, you know, it was
it's right there on the first page.
And it's right there on the first page.
But in those days, because I remember, you could not argue with your parents. Your parents were always right. You could not prove them to be wrong. Even though if you could
my
prove
dad
them,
was
right?
stubborn.
Yes, that's the stubbornness.
And he believed he was right about everything.
Yeah.
But he allowed for debate. It was one of the good things in my family was that me and my 2 brothers were able to sit around the family dinner table at night and take my dad to task on all kinds of different things. And he would debate clearly and logically. Yeah. You know, we couldn't talk him out of his religion as much as we tried real hard. But, you know, he would allow for debate. And that was one of the best things about my family upbringing was that
I had one of those debates this weekend.
Yeah.
I had to get our new Xbox set up to our system. And there's a guy, a local guy. His name was Robert, and never met this guy, but man, he came there to do a half an hour's work, and we spent 4 hours chit-chatting about everything, cannabis, everything. He was like, I did not expect to spend 4 hours here chit-chatting with you, right? So, it was pretty good. It was just out of the blue, right?
Prior to me quitting my real job, and taking on trying to end cannabis prohibition, I was a restoration guy. I was a carpenter.
Yeah.
I worked for insurance companies. So I would drive around with my truck full of tools, and I would fix whatever happened to be wrong that insurance would cover for cars driving into people's living rooms or break-ins or floods or whatever it was. And I spent a lot of time having philosophical discussions with many people along the way.
It's amazing.
I got to meet so many different people.
Did you show what you got there? That is an amazing roach clip. I like that.
I loved it. I loved it when I first saw it. It's got the medical symbol there. It's got the pot leaf there. It works really well. And it's old school. Yeah. That's what I really liked about it.
Well.
I mean, I love Gibby and his stuff too. Yes. Where's one of those?
But Gibby's will break if you drop it.
Yeah, but you know, I don't even have it here right now. Holy smokes.
This one will.
It's over there somewhere.
This one won't.
But no, Gibson Glass makes these beautiful glass mustache tokers. And Glenn's right, they break.
Yeah, well, you mentioned
well, there's one without the mustache. Yeah. We also have a mustache over there somewhere. If my lovely assistant Deborah would
find the mustache
and find the one, because this one has had the mustache break off of it.
Yes.
It's the thing with glass, man.
Yeah,
it's what makes it so valuable and so precious and nice to have and use is that it breaks.
I got to smoke under the $7,000 glass rig at 420. Jimmy Skoda brought his $7,000 black dragon, it was a dragon, fire-breathing dragon. It was really beautiful.
Maybe it won't break it.
Out of anything worth $7,000.
I suspect it'll break one day.
Well, one day. It was made by Mike Luna, and he's on Instagram. But yeah, this guy is really good, and felt really nice to be able to smoke it. Because my dad's rigs are $100 bucks, maybe $200 bucks. But never a $7,000 rig.
Oh, I've seen some very expensive pieces of glass smoking.
I think there's one those. What do they call them? Mother ones? Huh? Mothership. Yeah, those are expensive too, right? What are they, about $4,000 or $5,000?
They can go higher than that.
Higher than that.
I've seen some stuff that would be as big as this table that must have been worth so much money.
But why would you want to suck up all that air just to get your dab, you know? If it's really big
because
those motherships
humans are like that.
Oh, they're perfect?
Those motherships, the smallest one I've ever hit, just hit, like, it was perfect.
It's beautiful.
Those guys, they know what's
Wow. Wow, it's almost like my gravity bomb because that thing just keeps going and going and going. I put one dab in it and I can do it like spins about 5 times, whereas if you just do it with a torch, right? And some people are amazed. They're seeing me do it with the e-nail. One guy said, hey, how's this guy doing now with the e-nail, right? And so I had to explain what I was doing, but yeah.
Humans being humans.
Yeah, just experimenting and
humans
stoners
love to
getting
do this
stoned
kind of shit.
and do things, yeah.
That's what really separates us from the rest of the animal kingdom is we're really interested in doing shit like making pipes out of things.
Yeah.
So if you're a smoker, you can relate to this. Everything you see could be a pipe. You see some crazy looking thing, you go, I can make a pipe out of that.
Yeah.
You know?
I could do something with that.
I know. So yeah. Anyway.
Wow. So I went to this.
The point for me was that this whole campaign of demonizing cannabis for all of this time has resulted in still so much stigmatization of people that would be involved in using or growing or selling cannabis.
And a polluted earth.
And so much lies still from people who have vested interests.
Yeah.
Because what happened through all these decades of cannabis prohibition was a lot of people figured out how to make money off it.
Yeah.
So all these prohibitionists and people that support the prohibition industry, they're making their living off of cannabis being illegal. So they don't want it to be. So they're lying about it.
Yeah.
You know, the doctors are lying about it because, you know, they don't want people to know that you can grow most of what you need for your medical needs and you don't need their prescription pills. And so maybe they wouldn't get so many cruises or whatever it is they're getting for kickbacks or all the rest of it, right? So they have a vested interest in not telling the truth about cannabis. Law enforcement has a vested interest in not telling the truth about cannabis.
Yeah.
Governments who could be held probably liable, even for past decisions with respect to how they've handled cannabis prohibition. I'm telling you, our government here in Canada has known for decades that there is no justification for prohibiting cannabis.
No, they know.
And they know that. They've known that for a very long time. And so they're all very culpable. So they all have a very clear vested interest in not admitting that they were wrong because they could suffer liability for that. All of these huge industries within our society have a vested interest in continuing to lie about cannabis, to not allow it to be used in the way that it should be used, which is a free and open marketplace where anybody can grow it, anybody could sell it and open a store and get a license to sell it, and all the stupid regulations are gone because cannabis is one of the safest commodities in our entire world.
Yeah.
You can't overdose on this, and you can overdose on tomatoes and pears and peaches and plums and everything in the grocery store you could overdose and die on. Believe it or not, 24 liters of water will kill half the people that ingest that in a 15-minute setting. Everything is lethal. This is one of the least lethal things in the world. It's one of the most beneficial things in the world. So many people will tell you how much it's helped them. You know, we hear it all the time in the cannabis community, how much cannabis has helped people.
What about if we were able to grow hemp all this time, we wouldn't have so much greenhouse gases, and the Earth's atmosphere would be a lot better because the hemp plant takes in 4 times the amount of carbon dioxide than a tree does. And you can grow hemp 4 times a year. Yeah. So now instead of waiting 25 years for one tree to grow up while it's taking in carbon dioxide and we chop it down and we make some wood and some paper, we could do this.
Toilet paper.
Yeah, we could do this with hemp 4 times a year and make the earth a lot better. Yeah. And right now there's, I think the royal family is going to give $1 million to people who can make the earth work better. So grow friggin' hemp, fields of hemp, and let's make the planet a little bit better. Maybe you'll get that $1 million. You know, you never know, right? But we got to make this better.
Your point is well taken.
Yeah,
I mean, this is one of the most beneficial things on the flipping planet.
We would be so different right now. We might not have to worry about gases and stuff like that because the plants would be taking care of our air and helping us way more than trees did. Yeah. We can make clothing, like you said. We can make wood. We can make paper. We can make medicine with hemp.
It's food.
We can make rope.
It's
the most
fuel.
expensive rope in the world is a hemp rope, right?
It's fuel.
Yep.
You can say that one 3 times.
Bricks. You can make bricks with it.
Insulation.
And I'm not,
building materials.
I'm not racist. But
cement.
Our indigenous people made blankets and clothing in the 1600s and 1700s that we used to trade at the trading post with the guys who were hunting beaver and stuff like that. So why can't they do that now? Why can't they make their societies and their communities a lot better by growing some hemp, making some money? Because Canada doesn't have a place to process hemp. We have to ship it to the States. So if you're up there and you got some money, right now, like Jim B. Patterson is doing, he is buying up all the old pulp and paper mills. Now there's a man who's got the money to retool the place and start producing hemp. And
if you've got hemp clothing,
Yeah.
it probably came from China or the Philippines.
Yeah.
If it was grown in Canada, it still came from those places because that's where it's shipped to manufacture it. The reason you paid so much for it isn't because it's so much better than the other clothing that you could have bought,
Yeah.
but because it's had to travel actually the whole distance of the world, to get to you.
And
So
apparently they grew hemp in Chernobyl. It's really good for the soil, and it gets rid of the radiation
Yep.
quicker than any other plant.
it
Also,
reclaims fields where you've grown crops that deplete the nourishment. This puts the nourishment back into
it's an
the fields.
amazing thing, man. It really is.
And so, based on all of that and more, because we could go on
there's
for
more,
quite a
yeah,
while,
there's lots of
there's a
stuff.
lot to it. It's like the most beneficial, useful, valuable thing
Yeah.
in our environment. Based on that, it should be really expensive. How about gold? What does gold do for us? I got a little bit right here.
Yeah, I
You
don't
know,
have any. I just
you got
I got
silver.
it
Oh,
right
yeah, I got a little
there.
bit right there.
Yeah,
That's really expensive shit.
yeah.
Doesn't do much for anybody.
No.
Makes jewelry that people like, shiny
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
Now it's got some application in
True.
high tech stuff and what have you, and that's all great. But gold is hard to find.
Yes.
You see, that's the big difference.
Mm-hmm.
People need to understand that it's not about how beneficial something is that determines its actual cost. It's how easy is it to get?
Yeah.
How easy is it to grow? How easy is it to find? How easy is it to make?
Hemp is
What is the
pretty
cost to bring it to market?
Yeah.
Gold, it's expensive.
It is.
You know,
You gotta melt it. You gotta mine it.
you got to mine it,
you gotta
find
melt
it.
Yeah.
You know, you don't get very much of it.
No.
There's very small
Takes
quantities.
many years
There's
and
still a
years
big
and years
demand
to do
because
it.
they marketed it well, and so there is a demand for it. But really, it has some barriers to getting to market that drive the price up.
There's more of
you
a
know.
demand for it when the stock market goes down.
Yeah, but when something grows like a weed,
Yeah.
is super easy to produce large amounts of, that produces all this amazing crystal
Yeah.
that does so much. It's like so medically valuable, and all those things we just talked about, plus a whole bunch more we never touched on. Its value should not be driven by how useful it is and how beneficial it is.
Yeah, exactly.
That can be part of the equation,
Yeah.
but also the main part of the equation should always be, what did it cost to bring it here?
Yeah.
What did it cost to get from here to here?
Yeah.
And so, we're living in a world where we have been
I just hope for my
kidnapped
daughter's
by...
sake that in 20 years we are using hemp and stuff like that, and we've gone away from fossil fuels, and she'll have a better life than what we've had, I guess.
Well, that's why we're here, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
we're just trying to change things
Educate people.
so that, that in the future we can have some hope that cannabis won't be treated as something that, we aren't capable of handling, that must be dangerous or something, or, the government has to control it strictly. And it's just one example of a whole bunch of things where the governments are out of control.
Yeah.
And so, I'm hopeful that in the future we can get better representation for us as human beings and what our rights should be in the form of public servants. But it's going to take a real rethink of democracy to get there.
Well, they're really worried about losing money, but they're also beginning to realize that making the planet green can still make money. There's still money to be made. You just have to change the oil workers into something, maybe a solar panel installer now. I've seen stories about that, so that's what I'm referring to.
Well, but now you're not talking about government.
No.
You're talking about the corporations.
Yes.
Because it's really the corporations that are
control
driving what's going on with our government policies.
But if we're not
to do
buying
with
it from the
things.
corporations, then the corporations wouldn't be making it. So it is kind of us. We make that
We
wheel
have some
move.
power.
We make that wheel move by buying their products.
Yeah.
If we stopped buying a whole bunch of wood stuff and we started buying hemp products, what do you think they would produce more
But
of?
now you're
right?
asking for something that's intangible and difficult.
Yes.
And that is to get a whole bunch, like the vast majority of people on the
Changed
same
over.
page
Yes.
doing that. And that's
really
very
hard.
difficult because these corporations that we're up against are very sophisticated in marketing and getting rid of the competition and lots of other things as well. But really behind all this, I mean, I rail against government policy most of the time. But the government policy is being driven by the corporate agenda, always,
Yeah.
for sure. That's the corruption that I speak to all the time, is the corruption involved with the corporate agenda being carried out by our public servants. That's where it's very, very wrong. We need to have public servants that are limited in their power, that are transparent in what they do, that are accountable for selling us out to the corporate agenda, and who recognize that their role is to protect every individual free person in the democracy from the corporate forces that are always going to be there, those people that have money and leverage and really want to exploit us and want to monopolize. Well, yeah, they're in bed with them because that's the system that's evolved here.
Yeah.
We, as people, we've allowed this, although here again, up against very sophisticated forces that understand how to manipulate populations and all the rest of that. I mean, really, it's like a professional playing against a minor leaguer.
I know.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
It's amazing that we've moved the agenda of our rights and freedoms as far as we have. But I think we've gone backwards in many ways. We've made steps forward.
We've made steps forward, and
we've demanded it, and that's where we get it. Is when, it's up to us to demand these things. It's up to us to make these changes. If we just accept what we're offered, they're going to offer us the lowball.
Well,
because it's a whole different set of ethics that's being played upon. We're involved with human ethics. We care about each other. I care about your feelings, your family. I care about all these different things to do with people and humans. And those are human ethics. But in the business world, they use business ethics. And human beings are just a number. You're just a potential.
And that's where they come
and there's no care about your feelings or your family or anything like that. And so what they will do, if they are allowed to do it, is maximize their profits. They're going to minimize their costs. They're going to maximize their profits. It's even their mandate when sold to shareholders that they must do those things.
They must do that.
So if our governments allow them, give in to them, get bribed by them, get threatened by them, get whatever it is that they're doing to get those key people in our governments, our public servants, to get them to go along with their agenda, they got the ability to do it, and the point is they will do it. Because that's what they do. Business is just doing what business does.
And that's where that
it's furthering its own interest, expanding its empire, maximizing its profits, minimizing its cost, canceling out the opposition as best it can in whatever form. And if it's left unchecked, you'll have child labor, slave labor, you'll have all kinds of problems that we've experienced all through history. When we allow these forces, these greedy, rich, leveraged business groups to do just what they're going to do because that's what they do. You can't even fault them for it. It's what's got to happen. So what we need, we've struggled and scraped our way into getting some rights and some freedoms over the course of hundreds and thousands of years here, fighting the monarchs and fighting the pharaohs and fighting all of the dictators and the kings and the queens and everybody else that thinks they can own our asses and that they can tell us what to do and they can exploit us and live off of us. This has been going on forever. But, finally the common people started getting some rights way back like several hundred years ago with the Magna Carta. Even then, it was only just noblemen that managed to get a little more rights, from the sovereign than the masses of people who had no rights and were constantly exploited or taxed to death or just outright beheaded. And it's been going on forever. But despite all of that, we have managed, because, the truth usually rises to the top. And right, I think, usually wins out over wrong eventually. The truth eventually gets told. It's a long, long journey.
Fucking it can take a while.
It's a long
How many
journey.
decades have we been trying to get cannabis fucking to be recognized?
You can go back 700 years to the Magna Carta where the nobleman got some rights from the king. And extrapolate that to here where that concept has evolved into the common man having rights, into there being a democracy where people are sovereign beings, and that we have public servants, but we're not subject to anybody. This is what's supposed to be happening here, and we've allowed it to be evolved to the wrong direction because business will do what business will do. And if this is the system that we're going to use, where we're going to elect public officials into positions of power and influence, then they're going to get to those people. They're going to figure it out, whatever the loophole is there, and they don't even do it by ethics.
No.
Their ethics don't involve, doing the right thing.
It's not personal; it's business, right?
It's business, they have a little room down the hall that's occupied by these people in black suits, and they're there to really eliminate the competition, And none of the other departments know that's going on, but it's going on because that's just business doing what business does.
Yeah.
So we have to understand the creature that we're fighting against, and who it is that would take away our rights as individual people, and that's who it is. So they get to our government, and then our government sells us out.
Yeah.
And this is what's going on. So my beef is typically with the government. It's not with the businesses and with the corporations, because they're just doing what they're going to do. And they're going to be there, and that's that for that. We need governments that will regulate them and institute restrictions on them that don't allow for child labor and slave labor and for all of the other evils that happen when corporations get their way, when business gets its way. It will maximize profits at the expense of human beings every single time.
And get them to produce it sustainably. These people should be able to do that instead of just,
Yeah, we can have good regulations on businesses.
Yeah.
We can really do that.
Yeah.
The problem is that, of course that becomes obvious that it's needed.
Yeah.
So then there becomes lip service given to it.
Yeah.
And then eventually if they're pushed, they do something about it. But they're really all in bed together, like you say. They're in the pockets of these people. Then they set up a regulatory board.
Yeah.
They go, okay, we understand there's some problems with this particular industry here, so here we are, vote for us again. We're going to set up a regulatory board to monitor all these things that they're doing to make sure the public is safe. But then the problem is those regulatory boards quickly get taken over by people who really have the other side's interests in mind, because that's business doing what business does.
Yeah.
So we need to have regulations for regulatory boards, or an overseeing regulatory board whose job it is to regulate the regulators, to make sure that can't go on. And then we would be a lot better off than we are right now. There's things we can do. There are things we can do, but getting them to happen is the hard part.
We need somebody to invent the replicator. Like Star
replicator,
Trek. Yeah, because then we wouldn't have to worry about factories making these things. We just tell the computer to make it.
You've heard of 3D printers?
Yeah, but that's a 3D printer. That's not a replicator.
It will be.
So a replicator.
It will be.
Yeah, but in their time, the atoms and everything are in the air, and the replicator would bring them together and make what you have. Because it's all right here, right now, right? We just don't have a machine that will separate them and put them together.
There you go.
If we had one of those, we wouldn't have to worry about corporations making our basketballs and our shoes and all that stuff.
But the corporations would own the replicators.
They probably own the replicators, yeah.
This is the battle, folks. This is what it's really all about. As human beings, we are in a battle against business ethics. Our human ethics are at risk because of business ethics that will, if they can, exploit us and enslave us. That's what they do, because that's just the natural end result of trying to maximize your profits and eliminate your competition and eliminate the barriers to maximizing your profits. So this is what I've been calling for all along. We need to have a rethink of our democracy. We need to have public servants that are limited, transparent, and accountable, and understand that their role is to protect us as individuals from business ethics. And then maybe we'll have a much nicer society in the future. But for now, we're up against this. And the biggest and most obvious example of how we are not free people living in a democratic free system is the attempt to restrict and prohibit cannabis. Because as we've pointed out, Glenn and I think did a decent job of expressing that this is a very valuable plant. For many, many people, it's stuff that has changed their life. Many people will tell you it saved their life. Most people that are involved with cannabis will tell you that it really helps them in profound ways. And that's just the individual consuming of the magical vapors side of it. It's got a whole other industrial side of it as a fuel and as a fabric and as all of these other things that it can be used for.
The only bad stories that you'll hear about cannabis are the ones that come from the government.
Of course.
You'll never hear from a person.
Or from the medical association because they've got a vested interest, or you'll hear a police chief, because we talked about all this. That these people have a vested interest to lie about cannabis, to not tell the truth. And so this, for me, is the biggest and most glaring example of how we are not free here, and there's a great deal of corruption going on, because the most beneficial and the safest commodity in our environment is treated as if we shouldn't have it, it's dangerous, you can't have it unless you pay us a whole bunch of money for it. prior to legalization, where you pay your fine up front now, they used to charge you money for getting caught with it. But now you can just go to the government store and you can pay your fine right up front. Especially if you're buying a couple ounces, you're paying a pretty hefty fine. Because a couple ounces of weed, even if it's grown fantastically with all the best equipment and all the best people.
You can't buy a couple ounces legally because the possession limit is 30 grams.
Oh, is that right? You can only walk. I didn't know.
At a store.
Well, I knew that, but I didn't know the stores wouldn't sell you.
You can't leave.
Oh, how
you can't carry out more than 30 grams.
Right, so they sell you only ounces.
You gotta make two trips, three
if
trips.
you went and put the 30 grams in your car, could you go back in the store and do it again?
I guess
Maybe.
Yes.
Probably.
Yes. Just like if you were using one of those older clubs, you could go to another club and get your medicine from another place and almost double your prescription. Because,
right.
Right.
And of course, the government stores are not getting medicine by their own definition.
Yeah.
And you shouldn't do any of this at all.
No.
But I mean, you could probably just go from store to store to store.
Yeah.
What do they got? 600 stores now,
Something
700
like that,
stores in Alberta.
Yeah.
So where could you go, and what does reasonable access look like?
Grow your own is my best advice. Find people who grow their own is my next best advice. And otherwise, if you don't have any access, you don't have any friends, you don't know who to trust, go on the internet. Try some online dispensaries.
Yeah.
They're still very expensive for the most part,
Ask
but that's
your
because
friends.
of prohibition.
Ask your friends.
I'm talking about people who don't have friends. There might be somebody out there
no.
who really doesn't have anybody. They're alone in a community. Maybe they just moved there. You can go to CannaMatch.ca, and you can check out CannaMatch.ca and find people there who know how to hook you up properly. That would be the way to go.
Yep.
And we didn't plan that.
No,
you
we
didn't
just
know.
came
You
in.
didn't know I was going to say that. That was a real reaction.
Yeah, that was a real reaction. Yeah,
but it
that
just
was a
hit
good
me
idea.
immediately that is exactly the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Is,
but when I said ask friends, that sort of came up. Yeah.
If you don't have friends, no matter where you are, you can try CannaMatch.ca, and maybe you can find somebody locally that you can get together with and exchange all kinds of good information
Stories,
and magical vapors
Yeah.
with stuff like that.
And what if they happen to live in Vancouver?
Well, they could come to the Healing Wave RV,
The reefer van.
the reefer van.
The reefer van.
We'll go visit the reefer van in just a moment.
That's a good segue.
He knew what he was doing.
He knew
That's
what
why
he
he
was doing,
produces the show.
Yes.
I was getting there too.
Yeah.
But it's been a good discussion.
Yeah.
And it is really important information. And it's important for people to think about, what's right and wrong in this world,
Yeah.
And there's a lot about our system and our society that's not right. And it's only going to get right if we make it right ourselves.
Yeah.
So helping people understand, that something is really wrong. This is hurting a lot of people. It can help them be part of a solution. Mm-hmm. And so, that's why we want to cover these things this way. The whole prohibition of cannabis has really hurt a lot of people in extremely significant ways. My goodness.
I think Canada just needs to be able to start producing have some factories that'll produce the hemp that we could grow here, and things would change a lot.
Open the marketplace.
Yeah.
Open the marketplace. Let farmers grow what they want to grow.
Well, we're going to be able to do that next year, right? Here in British Columbia. They got that farm gate thing.
You get a farm gate thing if you get the license that is very expensive, and then there's a whole bunch of other regulations and restrictions, and that's not even there yet, and we'll just see how that all shakes out. I think we're going to move in the right direction.
Yes,
I think we have to. They can't maintain this super scam forever.
No.
But they're only going to give it up in increments.
Yeah.
So we as activists have to be happy with the increments, but not satisfied with the increments. We have to understand that this is an increment to getting us to where we need to be.
Yeah.
And where we need to be is to have, what we call it now is low barrier access.
Yeah.
That's the coined phrase that makes most sense, is that poor people need to have access to cannabis too. It's a plant.
Yeah.
You can grow it for connoisseurs with all the expensive equipment and all the expertise and knowledge, and you can get a good dollar for that, and that's fine. But for people that can't afford it, for poor people, for medical users, for people that have to use it daily, and in the case of what we're trying to do here on the downtown east side is primarily help out people that are addicted to opioids and street drugs and help them get off those. They have to be daily users. When they are using high-dose edibles to get through withdrawal, and then they're using concentrates and edibles to replace the use of those opioids, they're daily users for quite a while, unless they can wean themselves off. But even that's not a short-term thing. So those people need to have easy access to cannabis. It shouldn't be expensive
and it
for
could
them.
be really cheap, as the government is providing really good seeds so that they could grow it themselves. Like that saying, teach a man to fish, he feeds himself. Give a man a fish, he feeds himself. Teach the man to fish, and he can feed himself for his whole life.
That's right.
Same thing with the poor people.
Same thing with the
We
plants.
don't have to give them medicine. We could show them how to grow their medicine with these cheaper seeds, and boom,
By definition, the poorer people would be the group who would have least ability to grow for themselves.
Yes.
I mean, we're even talking homeless people here in many cases. People who are living in SROs, another thing. There's a lot of restrictions on people growing within their apartments and their condominiums and units.
Loosen the restrictions.
And all that needs to go away.
Yeah.
They're just growing plants like any other house plant. I mean, and it's better than any other house plant because you can overdose and die. Most house plants are toxic. If your kids start eating the leaves of many of the house plants that you have, or house plants in your garden, they'll get sick and in cases die. So, restrictions on people growing, a handful of plants in a small apartment. I mean, there's no reason for that restriction whatsoever.
I've had ideas of like storage places where you buy a locker to store your stuff. Well, we'll have the same idea like a co-op where poor people that are living in SROs or apartment buildings can grow at your
community
place.
gardens, for example.
Like a co-op cannabis grow-up, so that people.
I think those exist.
Really?
Not legally, but
I'd like to do one in Mission because there's an old flower place that's very famous here in Mission, but they closed in Mission. Right? So all the buildings are still there. They still have the store up front and everything, so you could sell the products that you need to grow your plants in these greenhouses and help a whole bunch of people who are medical people who have permits to grow to be able to grow all together. And you'd have to
in a reasonable world, that's exactly what we'd be doing.
We would have to,
But first, we have to get a reasonable world going on.
A reasonable world,
We're working on it, but I mean, there's a court case going on right now. Jerry Martin is typically a guest on the show here as we've followed his journey as a dispensary owner from Whitewood, Saskatchewan. For 4 years, he had a dispensary there serving the needs of his community and the surrounding community, had 1,000 members. But legalization meant that he was sent a cease and desist letter that, of course, no dispensary owner could ever follow. I mean, you're helping out 1,000 people with their medical needs with cannabis. And I mean, I personally know what that's like. I mean, I ran the herb school over there for a couple of years, 17 years ago. And, you learn pretty quickly how valuable what you're doing is for people. When people can't get access to cannabis, and cannabis is what's going to really save their life, they're very, very grateful that you're doing that. And so for a government that has already deemed you illegal for all of the 4 years you've been running your store, to then send you a letter and say you have to shut down and stop what you're doing, I mean, you can't do it. You wouldn't do it. Nobody would. You're already defying the law in the first place, so just another letter from the government is no different.
No.
Although you could maybe save your assets and save your skin a little bit, but really you don't, because the people you're helping are just too important to you. No dispensary owner is in it just for the money. Some dispensary owners start being in it just for the money, but pretty soon they get to meet human beings, and and they care about the people they're helping, and they structure price schemes to help these people and all the rest of it. So you're already defying the law. You're not about to turn your back on the people that just because the government is corrupt. So Jerry did not shut down his dispensary, and they came and arrested him, and they did seize his assets, and they've been after his skin for over 4 years now, almost 4.5 years since he was arrested, and now he gets his day in court. So Jerry is in court, well, not now because they've ended proceedings for the day. The court case started yesterday with witnesses being cross-examined. Again today, and they'll do it again tomorrow. Jerry gets his chance to be interviewed and cross-examined tomorrow. And so that's going on, and because there's a publication ban, we can't discuss what's going on there and tell you anything about it. And Jerry can't do that either, so I asked him not to come on the show today. I didn't want to compromise him in any way by perhaps suggesting or saying something about, because I've been listening, and you can listen in. There's a number you can call in. You'll have to maybe go on the internet to contact me if you can't figure it out any other way. Maybe I'll get Neil to post a link. But you can listen to the proceedings. It's being held through Zoom. But in the case of people wanting to listen, it's WebEx. It's WebEx. Maybe Zoom's not involved. Maybe
Zoom would probably be on their end.
That's what I mean. That's
Maybe
how,
they
because
might,
it's an audio-video
Is it audio
experience
For us,
for
it's
the
only
witnesses
audio.
and the lawyers
Yeah.
and the judge. But for people that want to witness it, it's just an audio,
just audio
call in
first.
and don't interrupt thing.
Yeah.
So
Put
that's
your phone
going
on
on. And what that's all about is low barrier access. It is about having dispensaries with the full range of cannabinoid products for people to use for all the different purposes it can be used for, with easy access, low barrier access, a storefront to walk into.
Yeah.
That's what's on trial here.
And lower prices.
Well, that's part of low barrier.
Yeah, low barrier, yeah.
Low barrier means that it can't be very expensive for you.
No.
If you're going to be a daily user, if you have to use every day, it can't be cost prohibitive. And there's no reason why it needs to be.
No. Yeah.
People who like really great cannabis can spend lots of money on it, and then that's fine. That's always going to be there. But cannabis doesn't need to be produced expensively. You can produce cannabis outdoors or in hybrid greenhouses. You don't have to trim it all real nice. You don't have to do much with it. And just like they produce other fruits and vegetables that get to market with pennies on the pound, for pennies on the pound is what your store is paying for most of the produce that you're buying.
Yeah.
The real exotic produce, they're paying a couple of dollars on the pound. No human being in this part of the world would ever pay more than $10 a pound for blueberries or grapes or strawberries or cherries or whatever you love. That would be ridiculous.
Yeah.
And all those farmers that are producing those things to bring to market are paying their rent, they're paying their family food bill and all the rest of it. You could also throw in a greenhouse full of cannabis and not spend a bunch of money on it and not have the fancy lights and all the equipment. And you could just cut, a foot and a half off each branch, bundle it all up, and bring it to market.
Yeah.
And that would be reasonable. There's no reason that can't happen, except there's a lot of forces involved that want to continue to demonize and stigmatize so that they can keep the price inflated. And now they see it as a money grab. There's a whole bunch of people that are thinking, wow, we can make a huge amount of money. Because you just do the math on it. When you wouldn't pay $10 a pound for the grapes or the cherries that are offered there, you wouldn't pay that. But you're going to pay $10 a gram.
Yeah.
And there's 450 grams, roughly speaking, in a pound.
Wow.
I mean, why would a farmer get paid that much more money for that crop? And if that was the case, in a free marketplace, every farmer would just grow cannabis. Why would you grow anything else? Nobody would be growing any strawberries or anything else like that. All available land, all available greenhouses would grow on this crop that you're going to get by the gram dollars for. So what would happen then is that the market would restore itself over time.
Yeah.
Because people would pay more for grapes and blueberries and strawberries and cherries. And farmers would start charging less for the cannabis because it doesn't cost, $4,000 to produce a pound of cannabis grown outdoors.
It's a weed.
Or even in a greenhouse. I mean, it doesn't cost that much money at all.
Nope.
So lots of those farmers would be saying, they'd want their share of the marketplace. If all the farmers were just growing weed, then there'd be a glut. There'd be a huge oversupply. So, there wouldn't be great demand for any new farmer growing cannabis. You'd have trouble getting into the marketplace. So to separate yourself from the others, to find your niche, many farmers would start lowering their prices and lowering their prices and lower until it somehow balanced out to what the cost of bringing it to market was, plus a reasonable profit to pay that they deserve. That's what the marketplace would do. But instead, we've got government interference that has resulted in first prohibition that drove the price to over $10 a gram. And now legalization that's decided because of all of these investors and the way that they can make cannabis legalization work, that they can get even more, after legalization per gram than the black market was charging. And they can even sell shitty cannabis and get away with it because if you use tax dollars to run an enforcement unit, a huge army of enforcers to make sure that nobody else gets to have a store, then you can keep charging whatever prices you want because some people just need to go to a store. They're not going to go to some guy's basement suite or meet somebody in a parking lot. So, this is the scam that we're all involved in right now is the government thinks that if they spend enough of our tax dollars, to enforce out anybody else that would dare threaten their little monopoly of only they get to have the stores for non-medical recreational cannabis, that they can make that work. And that's what we're living in here. When money is tight, and already we have enough stresses in our world, they got to stop this one. They got to stop this bullshit, because people are being hurt by this, and so many people are being hurt by this.
A lot healthier.
This whole situation of drug prohibition has also resulted in the opioid crisis.
Yep.
There would be no street drugs poisoned by some outside supply.
Let's say less.
Well, there wouldn't be.
There's a balance for everything. We know that because you have one thing, you're going to have the other.
You don't go and buy well, maybe you buy a hammer off a guy who stole it off a job site, so maybe there's going to be a black market for everything. All right, there's going to be a black market for everything.
There'll be less of it, yes.
But, if people could get what they want for themselves or think that they need for themselves, if they could get it reasonably, if the government allowed access to the things that the people on the streets decide that they need to do for themselves, then we wouldn't have street dealers selling it to people, because nobody's going to go and buy something off a street dealer, especially now where the drug supply can be tainted. If there was a store they could walk into, if there was a healthcare professional in that store that they could get advice from, if they could really improve their lives by walking into a storefront instead of dealing with a street dealer and going into a back alley and shooting up who knows what into their arms, we would not have the problems that we're having with this. Yeah. This is all driven by government policy on prohibition. And so now it turns out that one prohibited substance can solve the epidemic of deaths with the other prohibited substance. And the government is resisting.
Yep.
And so what we did was we set up a program 4 years ago now, last February, where we started handing out care packs of high-dose edibles to people on the downtown east side of Vancouver. People from the neighborhood that were willing to line up for a couple of hours through all kinds of different weather to get the high-dose edibles that they hoped would help get them off the street drugs and improve their lives. And we had such great success with that program over the 3.5 years that we were at Vandu, just close to Main and Hastings, where we did that for every Saturday for the first year and every Thursday and Sunday for the 2.5 years after that. So much success. Documented by Dr. M.J. Malloy, who subsequently put out dozens and dozens of studies on the effectiveness of cannabis as a replacement therapy for opioid use or opioid misuse. Also, when push came to shove and we required letters of support from people, we had a wonderful letter written to us by Professor Zachary Walsh, the foremost expert on cannabinoid substitution for opioid misuse. Also, we have the local downtown psychiatric nurse. Trish is a big supporter of ours. Vandu, Wars, OPS, all of the harm reduction groups that are working hard to try to, improve the lives of these poor people that are afflicted by the addiction to drugs and the other things that are going wrong with these people. All of those groups support our efforts and have written us letters of support. All of that resulted after 2.5 years at Vandu with the city of Vancouver passing a bylaw saying that they would support, or passing a motion rather, that they would support low barrier access to cannabis based on what we had been doing and what the High Hope Society had been doing as well in handing out high dose edibles to people on opioids. So because of that, our group formed a society to better be able to deal with things and speak to government. We formed a collaboration with a business to open a storefront. We found a storefront. We had a meeting, by the way, with the city of Vancouver, with the councillor who passed that motion, and had an understanding that we would find a storefront and start providing low-cost and no-cost cannabis. And so we did that, and that was 10.5 months ago. And for 4.5 months, we occupied this space as our store. It was much nicer then. And it was a beautiful place and a wonderful service we were providing, and we were well on the way to expanding our programs and doing a much better job even of helping the community. But the city of Vancouver would not ultimately support us in the form of a business license that would have allowed our landlord to continue to rent to us. And so because they were requiring the federal government first to allow this before they would, we applied to the federal government with a big comprehensive application, many, many pages long, all kinds of things in there, all of these letters of support, the studies done by Dr. M.J. Malloy, and much, much more in there, a 90-minute video clip of quick interviews with the people that we're helping here that was just so moving. And that application went in along with an emergency application for a temporary ministerial exemption, and that was over 7 months ago now. And so when evicted from here, we got an RV, we parked it on the curb. We've been out there for just about 6 months and 2 more days, and that's where we are at this point. We're still waiting for the federal government. The federal government, or the Health Canada, had a conference call with us and our lawyers. John Conroy has been so fabulous in the work that he's done for us. We can't thank him enough. It's been just amazing. Without him, we wouldn't think we had a chance. But not only do we have a chance, we know that the application that we have put into Health Canada is something that they could absolutely never say no to. There'd be such political carnage if they were to do that, that there's no way they can say no to that application. Because people would die, and the experts in the field have concurred with that. And it's not just a couple of people, it's hundreds of people. We have 250 people that, since our project became a program, now get 420 milligrams of high-dose edibles every 4 days. And that's been going on for all of these 10 and a half months. And all those people would be left out in the poison drug supply if we weren't here and they weren't able to rely on us.
And you have a waiting list.
We have a waiting list. We would be expanding how many people we could help if we could get the support that we need. Yep. But we have been pretty good. We have enough donations, and we've been able to help all the people that come to us that aren't on our list of people that get the 420 milligrams. Actually, there's a bunch of people that come daily that get a joint, a muffin, 2 or 3 muffins, a couple of cookies, and
come see that guy there, George.
You see George yeah.
Your employees are on the phone and they're working.
What time you got?
5:21.
Oh, we got time. It'll be a short visit. They were concerned that we weren't coming out at all two weeks ago.
Out there nude from the van.
I see. They're probably watching the show.
They are.
Yeah, they are. And we're going to go out there and check with them in just a minute or so. I just wanted to give everybody who hasn't watched the show before a bit of a background about what it's all about. And so, we have this project that became a program, and now we're offering it 6 days a week, 8 hours a day from the RV, along with the low-cost cannabis for people, because many people, also can't be part of a program, wouldn't sign up for a program, but they want to be able to access. That's the whole idea, folks. We need to have a store where people can walk into discreetly, get what they need without much scrutiny, and because many people are ashamed of their addiction, they're ashamed of their need. And so we need to accommodate those people almost more than anybody else. It's a very vulnerable group of people that needs to have access. So we're trying to do that for them. We're hoping the government supports us in that pretty soon. And that's what I know.
Patty, let's get on this thing.
Yeah, really, seriously, Dakota and Patty, we really could use that ministerial exemption. It wouldn't take much to do that. I'm telling you, you would be heroes and you'd save lives by doing it. And for those of you, that have the ability, a letter to Minister Patty Haydu or her assistant Dakota, or to Health Canada, Special Licensing and Exemptions Division, anybody that's in any type of a position of influence that you can think of that might be able to help us, that's what you can do to help get this. And it's really important. It's not just about here on the downtown east side. This is about communities all across Canada that are struggling with the same thing. And it's not just about struggling with the opioid addiction and people dying from overdose. It's about people struggling with improper access to cannabis. People that don't have the money to go to the government stores, or maybe there's no government stores in their community because it's up to a community whether they even have them or not. There needs to be easy access to cannabis for everybody that wants to use it and needs to use it. And one of the ways we can do that is by communicating that to all those people that might have the ability to influence, from media to politicians to other people as well. So let's go out and say hi to the people in the van.
All right, we'll see you next week, sir.
Yeah, well, thanks, Glenn, so much for extended visit.
No problem. I like it.
Every show's different these days. One of these days, when we actually get our permission and we know what we're doing, we'll have a different format. We'll try something else.
Yeah. All right, let's go out and see the people.
We're a block away from Main and Hastings, the core of drug dealing on the downtown east side of Vancouver. It's right through that laneway right there. You can give a shot if you want. It's a block away. And it's really important that we be here, because this is where the people are that need our help. This is where they can find us. And it's really important that once we got evicted from the store that we stayed in this location, because many of the people that are in our 250 that we're helping with the program, they don't have contact information. We can't even get a hold of them. So if we were to move somewhere else, they wouldn't know where we were. So we needed to stay here, and that's what we did. We got this wonderful machine here, the RV, and this has become our base of operation. Hello.
Hello.
Jennifer Nelson, how are you? Doing well. A sneak peek in the inside of the Healing Wave van. I see Andrew's waiting at the back door. He likes to show off his tray full of food. You have to knock on the door. That's the trick, is you have to knock. He doesn't always answer it, but you have to knock anyway. How you doing?
Not bad.
Andrew Morgan. Show us your tray, buddy. This is what we have for helping people.
Yeah.
We have gummies, and these are mini donuts.
Yeah, they're 80 milligrams each.
I think these are Damien's cookies, and we probably got stuff from Colleen here, and we got stuff from Carly Thiessen here, and
got
Joe
75
Pepper.
milligram fudge, 100 milligrams gummy balls, 5 milligrams each. We got some cookies, 80.
John Murray's muffins.
80 milligrams. We got some fudge from Damien at 75 right here, but
Right.
this is 200 milligrams.
I see. It's a bigger bar.
Yeah.
Nice.
And then we got cubes right here at 50 milligrams each.
Right? And you
Yeah.
got some capsules.
Yeah,
Oh,
we
yeah.
have capsules right here. We have some hybrid capsules right
Right.
here.
And everybody gets a joint as well.
Sure they do. We have some
Yep.
joints right here.
And there's topicals.
Yeah, we got some.
Cool.
Yeah, we have some right here.
Pull that out there. Cuthbert's Cream, so awesome in giving us a nice donation for people. All of this is by donation. All those people that I mentioned there,
Very nice.
you know, they're all donating their time
People love it.
and
It's great.
and other things to
Yeah.
to make that all happen.
Very nice.
So we're
We
so
appreciate
thankful.
all of it. It's excellent. Everybody loves it.
And you've had a good day here.
We've had a great day. We've had 25 people so far.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. And a whole
Everybody
bunch more at the side window that aren't part of the program that they still get John's
sure.
muffins or Michael the Cookie Monster's cookies.
Yeah, we like
you
to
know.
help. We like to help everybody we can.
And we got landlord and his son Edward there rolling joints for us as well.
Everybody's hurting down here. We like to help them.
All right,
Time.
let's go. Inside. This is where I spend most of my time, sitting in the captain's chair watching the sitcom go on in front of me here. I call it an interactive sitcom because it's funny as hell and the characters are amazing. And and it's more fun than I can imagine having any other thing doing during the day. So here's where we are. And yeah, it's a little bit cooler today. It's a little cooler today. It was pretty hot there for a week or so. We got some little fans that we
The
can...
sun tried to come out a little bit today. It just didn't really last.
It feels a bit cool in here. Not really cool enough for the heater.
I was just thinking of turning it off.
You were? Well, don't let me stop you. So anyway, this is the Healing Wave CSP van that we've been in for 6 months now. And as much as we love it, we'd really like to get back into the store. We could really do a much better job of helping people in the store for sure. When it's raining or even hot, it's not all that pleasant here. And so there's just no reason why we can't have a store. You know, it's just mind-boggling when you think about it. That cannabis is something that many people want. It's what many hundreds of thousands of people need, and yet the government has structured a system of obtaining it that is absolutely unobtainable for many people. And so, you know, we just want to get our store back. We want to have other people have stores in other places because the need is great right across Canada. And as long as the government is going to continue with what they're doing, we're going to continue to talk about what they're doing and tell you that what they're doing is absolutely wrong, and you know, help you understand why it's so wrong. So that's the show. That's what we're doing. We'll be back next week to tell you some more things about where we're at. Maybe by next week, Health Canada has given us our permission and we have a temporary exemption, at least, if not our licenses. We'll have to wait and see, and that's what we're just doing. Is we're just waiting. We're not stopping, but we're waiting and hoping that somehow we can overcome this situation and the world can start to be a much better and nicer place. And that's what's going to happen if people can have easy access to cannabis. It will make the world a much better place, for sure, guarantee you, because cannabis is kind of the love drug. It's the drug of peace. It's the drug that causes people to think twice before they do things and give some thought to what's right and what's wrong. And it's not always easy to know what the right thing to do is, but having a little puff of these magical vapors and thinking about it sometimes can really help people to see through the fog, to see through the bullshit, the media programming, the government programming, the corporate agenda, and all those things that are encumbering our life, that are making our lives difficult, that are hurting our families and our people. Having a few puffs of the magical vapors can help people understand all of that a little better and do the right thing by knowing what the right thing to do is. So I hope you can take some of this home with you, or take it to heart and spread it out throughout the world. And if we can get to cannabis legalization, and that'll start to get the corruption out of government, and that'll start to clear the minds and the eyes of people with respect to what their rights should be, what right and wrong is, then the world will be a better place. And if we all try to do that just a little bit, we can really move mountains, because one person can't do very much, but a whole bunch of people can do, in just a little bit, can do a lot. Just look at the pyramids, I guess. So I'm really thankful to everybody that's helped us with our program to get it to where it is, to all of these wonderful people who've been with me for all these years actually now in helping the program run. Very thankful to Pot TV for allowing me the platform to be able to communicate this to all of you. Very thankful to all of you for watching the show and taking some of this with you. Thankful to my producer Neil, who's so good at making it all work and making me comfortable enough to do this, which is not my natural thing to do and not something I'm all that comfortable with. But I am very happy to be able to communicate the message that I think is so important. And so for that, I'm very, very thankful to be able to have this show. And Pot TV has been around for a very long time. One of the first internet broadcast mediums to start putting out shows a long, long time ago. We have Greg Williams to thank for that. Rest in peace, buddy. I miss you so much. And so there's other shows that we do here on the Pot TV network as well. On Mondays, Carly Marley has the 420 Lifestyle Show with BC Bud Gal. BC Bud Gal's back on Thursdays with what's the name of her show, Neil?
Morning Glory.
Morning Glory. I don't know why that slipped my mind. But Fridays you can all, and that's at 10 a.m. by the way. The other shows are right around 4 o'clock. Johnny B's on Friday around 4 o'clock with How's It Growing? And growing is so important. That is like the thing of the future, because we can all grow our own medicine. We can all grow our own recreational products, and we can save our money and have some fun growing stuff. And I don't mean that we can all grow, because some of you I'm sure can't grow, but those who can grow, it's a wonderful thing to do. And if you want to know how to do that, Johnny B is one of the best resources for that. He's got so many archived shows about growing weed, and you can tune into him on Fridays as well. Boss Lissa, probably still too busy managing most of the Cannabis Culture Store to do her show on Saturdays, but she might come back with High Noon. And Sundays and Saturdays are days you can, stream, and Wednesdays too, because we haven't filled that slot. Those are, big shoes to fill with our friend Greg. And, so have a look at what Pot TV's got going on. Think about what you can do to try to make the world a better place, and there's lots of opportunity to do that. And, as you go about your life, be kind to everybody, be kind to yourself, love yourself. It's very important. It's got to start there. And the most important thing in my mind is no matter what these obstacles and barriers and things are that are not right about our world, no matter what you do in trying to fix it and trying to navigate it and trying to live despite it, have as much fun as you can.